If an ordinary person earning an average salary wanted to match Elon Musk's fortune, they would need to work for 8 million years. To put that in perspective, that's 30 times longer than modern humans have even existed. And in the time it took you to hear that sentence, Elon Musk just made another $100,000. But here's the twist. Elon isn't even the richest person in history, not even close. Throughout time, there have been men whose wealth, influence, and power make even Musk look small. Some ruled nations, some built empires, and some controlled entire worlds without ever leaving their palaces. Tonight we travel through 1,000 years of human ambition to find the richest person who ever lived. Our story begins in the 1980s, the decade of chaos, excess, and cocaine. A Colombian billionaire named Pablo Escobar was redefining the meaning of wealth. He wasn't just rich, he was printing money, literally. Every week Pablo earned an estimated $420 million. His total wealth, adjusted for inflation, reached around $80 billion. But unlike the billionaires of Wall Street, Escobar's empire wasn't built on stocks or politics. It was built on cash. He reportedly spent $1,000 a week just on rubber bands to hold his money together. Rats would eat his stored bills, and he'd lose $2 billion a year just from decay and damage. Escobar may not have been the richest man on paper, but in terms of pure physical cash, he might have been the wealthiest human to ever touch money. Now, let's go back to 1945. World War II has just ended. Across Europe, millions are rebuilding from the rubble. In the Soviet Union, one man holds more power than anyone on Earth: Joseph Stalin. Stalin had no interest in personal riches. He owned almost nothing. No mansions, no luxury cars, just his pipe, his books, and his military uniform. His salary was modest, about $30,000 a month in modern terms, but it hardly mattered. Because Stalin didn't need money, he owned the entire state. Every factory, every field, every life belonged to him. Criticize him, even whisper a joke, and you'd vanish into the gulag. When Stalin suffered a stroke, no one dared to call a doctor for 12 hours. They feared he might recover and punish them for acting without permission. Stalin's personal wealth was nothing, but his absolute control over a $10 trillion economy made him one of the richest rulers in history, not in gold, but in sheer terrifying power. In 1909, a young, poor artist named Adolf Hitler lived homeless in Vienna. He painted postcards to survive. He dreamed of greatness, but the world ignored him. 2 decades later, he ruled Germany. When Hitler came to power in 1933, his personal wealth skyrocketed, not through business, but through manipulation. He made his book, Mein Kampf, mandatory reading across the nation. The government bought 6 million copies, and he made himself tax-exempt. He even copyrighted his own image and speeches, earning royalties every time they were printed or sold. By the 1940s, he had amassed millions in personal income, but that was nothing compared to what he controlled. At its height, Nazi Germany occupied nearly all of Europe. Through conquest, Hitler commanded resources worth an estimated $3 trillion in today's money. A dark empire built not on wealth, but on devastation. Across the ocean, another man was creating a different kind of empire, not of war, but of wheels. In 1914, Henry Ford revolutionized the world of industry. He did something unthinkable. He doubled his workers' pay from $2.50 to $5 a day and cut their work week to 5 days. Then he introduced the assembly line, slashing production time for the Model T from 12 hours to just 90 minutes. For the first time in history, ordinary people could afford cars, and the world changed forever. Ford didn't just invent mass production, he invented the modern lifestyle. Suburbs, commuting, weekends, so much of our daily lives came from his vision. Though his personal wealth peaked around $200 billion in today's money, his true richness was his influence. He created the modern middle class, making him one of the richest men in human impact. Let's go back further to the late 1800s, a time when pollution was a sign of progress and child labor was legal. This was the era of the robber barons, industrial giants who turned capitalism into an art form. Cornelius Vanderbilt ruled the railroads. Andrew Carnegie built the steel that held up America, but the king among them was John D. Rockefeller. By 1880, his company, Standard Oil, controlled 90% of the entire nation's oil refining industry. When the government broke up his monopoly, He didn't lose. He multiplied. By owning shares in every new company that was created, Rockefeller became the world's first billionaire. At his peak, he was worth 2% of the U.S. economy, which would be around $400 to $600 billion today. Rockefeller didn't just dominate an industry, he defined modern capitalism. Now, imagine the year 1744. Electricity doesn't exist. The average life expectancy is 30. In a Jewish ghetto in Frankfurt, a boy named Mayer Amschel Rothschild is born. He starts out by selling rare coins, then moves into banking. But Mayer has a grand vision: to build a global financial empire. He sends each of his 5 sons to the 5 great financial centers of Europe: London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, and Frankfurt. Together, they create the world's first international banking network, financing wars, nations, and revolutions. It was whispered that the Rothschilds had more money than kings. Some estimates put their combined family fortune at over $500 trillion in today's value, though no one truly knows the exact figure. They controlled loans, currencies, and governments, quietly ruling from behind the curtains of history. 100 years earlier, in 15th century Germany, another name dominated Europe's wealth: Jakob Fugger. He financed wars, funded kings, and even influenced the Catholic Church. When Emperor Charles V needed to buy votes to become ruler, it was Fugger who wrote the check. At his height, Fugger controlled 2% of Europe's entire GDP, which would be worth nearly $400 billion today. His wealth reshaped Europe and even helped spark the Protestant Reformation when the Church sold indulgences to repay its debts to him. He was both a kingmaker and a revolution trigger, a reminder that money doesn't just buy influence, it creates it. Now we travel to the deserts of Africa, to the year 1324. Mansa Musa, ruler of the Mali Empire, is about to take a journey that will make him a legend. He leads a procession of 60,000 men and 100 camels, each carrying hundreds of pounds of pure gold, on a pilgrimage to Mecca. Along the way, he gives away so much gold that he crashes entire economies. The price of gold in cities like Cairo collapsed and didn't recover for years. When he returned, stories of his riches spread across continents. Maps from the era even depict him covered in gold, holding a golden staff. Historians estimate his net worth was around $400 billion, though some believe it was immeasurably higher. To this day, Mansa Musa remains a symbol of unimaginable wealth. Before there were billionaires, there was Genghis Khan. In the early 1200s, he conquered more land than any human in history. His empire covered 20% of the Earth's surface. If that land were valued today, his control would equal a staggering $130 trillion. But Genghis Khan lived simply, eating with his soldiers, sleeping in tents, and owning almost nothing but the loyalty of his men. He didn't hoard wealth, he distributed it to ensure absolute control. And that made him one of the richest rulers not in treasure, but in unity and fear. Let's go to the year 1 AD. The Roman Empire dominates the known world, and at its center is one man, Augustus Caesar. After defeating Mark Antony and Cleopatra, Augustus seized Egypt as his personal property. He controlled nearly 1/5 of Rome's entire economy: the taxes, the mines, the gold, and the empire's treasury. He was known to execute rich citizens just to confiscate their fortunes. When he died, Rome declared him a god. Historians estimate his personal wealth in today's money at around $5 trillion. Augustus Caesar didn't just rule Rome, he owned it. And 1,000 years before Caesar, in the Kingdom of Israel, reigned King Solomon. He supposedly collected gold by the ton. His annual revenue was said to be 666 talents of gold, which could be worth up to $2 trillion today. He had 700 wives, endless palaces, and temples glittering with gold. But Solomon's story blurs the line between history and myth. His empire may have been real, or it may have been a legend, a reflection of how even ancient people equated wisdom with immense wealth. So from Escobar's billions in cash, to Stalin's empire of fear, from Ford's innovation, Rockefeller's oil, and Rothschild's gold, to Mansa Musa's glittering deserts, and Caesar's marble empire. Who truly was the richest person to ever live? The answer depends entirely on how you define wealth. If you measure it by money, Rockefeller or maybe even Rothschild take the crown. If you measure it by power, then Stalin and Genghis Khan ruled without equal. If you measure it by influence, Henry Ford changed how the entire world lives. And if you measure by legacy, then perhaps every one of them was rich in their own way. Because the richest people in history weren't just wealthy, they were world builders. And long after their gold turned to dust, their influence still shapes the lives we live today. Elon Musk may be the richest man alive, but history tells us one thing for sure. Someone, someday, will surpass him. And when they do, they'll be standing on the shoulders of giants, the richest humans who ever lived. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey through history as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. See you in the next one.